Good afternoon and welcome to the fourth of our Lunch with the League series. Before we start, I would like to make a few announcements. Please remain muted throughout the session. There will be a question and answer session after we hear from our speaker today. So if you have any questions for him, please put them in the chat directed to Chelsea Satula. Finally, I would like to advise you that this session is being recorded and the link to the recording of each of the sessions will be available on our league website. The link to the website is in the chat. At this time, I'd like to introduce the president of our local league, Betsy Patterson, who will make a few remarks.
Thank you, Pat. I'm Betsy Patterson, president of our local league. The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920, 6 months before the ratification of the 19th Amendment, granting women their right to vote nationwide. It was established as a nonpartisan, grassroots organization to encourage voters to become active participants in our democracy. The League has many activities, including registering voters, informing them about the issues and the candidates through our voter guides and candidate forums, and getting out the vote during elections. We also educate the public about how our government works. In this series, we will interview Ventura County elected officials to learn what their roles are in the government, what skills are required, and what challenges they face. It is not a candidate forum or a campaign opportunity. It is a chance to educate the public about about the work they do in the day-to-day functioning of our county. Thank you for joining us. We hope you gain a better understanding of what our Ventura County elected officials do in their jobs. And now I would like to turn the program over to our Voter Services Co-Chair, Pat Malcek.
Thank you, Betsy, for your warm welcome. We now are going to screen share a chart that shows how our county government is organized. In this series, our intent is to focus on those county officials who are elected, and we are interviewing them over a period of 6 weeks. Although we have multiple county supervisors, for the purpose of the series, we will only be interviewing one of them chosen who will share with us the various aspects of the role of county supervisor. At this time, I have the pleasure to introduce our County Clerk-Recorder, Registrar of Voters, Mark Lunn. Welcome, Mr. Lunn, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me today.
On June 8th, 2010, Mark Lunn was elected Ventura County's Clerk-Recorder, Registrar of Voters, bringing to the office his plan for reform and innovation. Mark has since worked tirelessly to preserve the county's historical heritage, protect the public's personal documents, and ensure that elections are as fair as they are free. He has coined the slogan, preserving history and protecting democracy, to describe the office's responsibility. Mr. Lunn is a lifelong public service with almost 5 decades of experience at the city, county, and state levels. In 1972, Mark began his law enforcement career with the California State Police, working diligently in the security detail protecting California Governor Ronald Reagan, and later other statewide office holders and U.S. presidents. He has been active in the community throughout his career, serving on numerous nonprofit executive boards, including the Ventura County Housing Board of Directors, Thousand Oaks Planning Commission, and the RDP 21, as well as successful business owner over 24 years. Mr. Lunn has earned a bachelor's degree with honors from the University of Laverne, an MBA with honors from California Coast University, an Associate of Arts degree from Pasadena City College. Mark has served on the board of directors for the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials since 2011. He is the current president of the County Recorders Association of California and has also served as vice president, treasurer, and secretary. In 2012, Mark earned the professional designation of Certified Elections Registration Administrator, which is the highest professional designation achievable and is held by less than 1% of elected officials in the United States. Mark is a certified California registration and election official, and has been licensed California private investigator since 1992. Mark resides in Newbury Park with his wife of 30 years and the family dogs, Pudge, Diesel, and Maverick. Okay, Mr. Lunn, I'm going to ask you a few questions to bring you into the presentation. Our first question, Mr. Lunn, could you please explain to us what the qualifications and prerequisites are that prepare one for the role of County Clerk-Recorder and Register of Voters?
Well, we have to be alive, first of all. And you have to be a registered voter of the County of Ventura. And in terms of legal requirements, that's all there is for my particular position. There's the other countywide electeds that you referred to with the screenshot earlier about how county government is made up. They have various qualifications for their particular positions, but for this job, it's nothing legal. It's things that you should have on a personal level. And I agree with this. There's a low bar to put the person that ultimately, and I know what your main concern is elections, to put them in a position to run elections. The people make the choice. And so I think that the wisdom of the county and not putting a bunch of requirements on the position, it was well thought out. However, I think personally, there are some things that I think that this position you need to have to be successful. And I think that anybody that goes into public service, and unfortunately, despite my youthful appearance, I am in that fifth decade right now. I don't have it done yet. Yeah. But you have to have a servant's heart. If you're going to serve others and perform functions that you're entrusted with, that nobody else is entrusted with, you have to understand that the pecking order is the people that you serve and that you are supposed to serve them. So I think you need to do that. Also for this position, which I made abundantly clear, and I'll talk about why I ran in the first place and try not to bore you. I'll make that a very quick response, is you've got to be non-political for this position. I wear three hats. I'm the clerk, I'm the recorder, and I'm the registrar of voters for the County of Ventura. All three very distinct roles. The one that's most public and the one that you're most interested in is registrar of voters. And you really do need to have the ability to lead apolitically. We all have our own thoughts and our own political affiliations and all that, but you have to come to work every day and set the tone within your organization of not being political. And I think that that's an important tenet, because that leads into another qualification I think that somebody needs to have in this job, and that's the ability to create and earn trust. And to be able to create and earn trust, you have to be good to your word. You have to have plans and goals that people can identify with, and then you have to get them done. And people have to trust you to do that. And to trust mainly is being consistent, and is being open, and being able to answer questions and to set policies with the consent of the people. And the league certainly helps with that. You have to have some sort of ability to lead, because it's an organization that you are leading in three different disciplines. So that's also helpful. And then you have to have the courage, I think, and courage is the right word, to take hard positions and hard stances. In this role, there's always an attempt by the major political parties to have some sort of an influence or gain a leg up when it comes to elections. And it's a constant thing. It's just like all the people that are trying to get into our computers. It's a natural thing of politics, and you have to have somebody that's strong enough to be able to tell folks no and to hold them off. And then you need to be educated about what the job is. I came from a career of law enforcement. So I was asked by the district attorney and the sheriff, the former sheriff, and my predecessor to run for this position after he had retired for medical reasons. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't think that I can do that. And they kept coming for about 6 months. And finally, at the time, the Board of Supervisors there was a lot of discussion about turning this position into a non-elected position. And it's been an elected position since 1873. And that's when I decided to step up to run, because I think the election official for any county needs to be accountable to the people, not to a bureaucrat that doesn't have any fingerprints on to get the work done. So that's what's been important to me. I think I've been effective in being able to take care of the politics, to hold it at bay, and yet be able to inform people and to be of service to those major political parties. The education, you mentioned it in the bio. I'm not going to bore you with that, but we never had an election official here certified nationally. Auburn University oversees those efforts. And so I think that that's important to do. And I'm a lousy spectator. I've been engaged, and Ventura County has had a seat at the table for the Clerks and Election Officials organization, a statewide organization. I was here for a year before I joined the board of directors, been on ever since. And just one little correction on the bio that we haven't gotten to yet, because we had a recent change in our registrar of voters, but I just finished the presidency of the County Recorders Association. I'm very happy to be a past president, because there's a lot of extra work here that goes with that service, but that just goes back to a service heart, and hopefully that illuminates how and why I got here and how I view the position and what I think is important for somebody that sits in this seat to have.
Thank you, Mr. Lunn. Going along with that, the next question that I think flows right into that, how long is your term, and are there term limits?
Well, the term is for 4 years. As you pointed out, I was elected in 2010 because the office was vacant at the time. It was being run by the assistant clerk-recorder. I was appointed in July of 2010. So every 4 years, my report card is plain and clear and goes to the voters. We're just about ready to enter into another election season now, starting on the 14th, happy Valentine's Day of February. We begin the official filing for the offices in the upcoming election in June. So I've been elected 3 times, and thankfully so. It's been in the honor of my life.
Now, Mr. Lunn, what is the department's budget, and how many employees are in your department?
Our budget is around $15 million. Around 15 million. The reason I say that is we go in every year. We're going in next month to look at our budget. What the variable in that budget is the election part of the responsibility. And because we don't know what is coming around the corner. We used to have off-year elections. You all remember that? There are no off-year elections. We're having elections all the time. And so the budget has to be accommodated for those particular efforts. I've had great success. Our county has taken very good of our elections division in providing us the resources that we need to get our job done. So for about 15 million or so. The other part of that is because of the responsibilities of the office, we take in monies from recordings and we send that out to all the governments throughout the county of Ventura. We cashier a little over $25 million every year to various agencies throughout the county of Ventura. So I hope that answers that. I think you asked me about how many employees that I have.
Correct.
Full-time employees, it's about 65 or so full-time, but our office is augmented because of elections, again, by fixed terms. And what I mean by that, temporary employees that are not full-time employees. So at any given time, we're probably a little around 75 people that are working here until we start to approach the elections. And then that 75 grows to over 100 that are here in the office. And based upon what type of election we're conducting, of course, we're changing models. And we'll get a chance, hopefully, to talk about that. That number of employees on election day, as you can all know, when we had almost 400 polling places, grows to about 1,800. But on a day-to-day basis, 75 is probably a good number to use, give or take.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Lunn, what do you think the top priorities or functions of your office are? What are three, for example, priorities and functions of your office?
Well, on the clerk side, we're responsible for birth, death, and marriage records, and lots of other things that people probably wouldn't associate with. But those are the three main things in life. We like to think that everybody that lives or works in Ventura County is a client to this office, whether they know it or not, based on those three documents. We hold oaths of offices. We do notary public registrations and process servers and fictitious business names. And we record over 200 different document types, most of which are either court-related or real estate in nature. So that's important. And then the other hat, the registrar's hat, it's my responsibility to make sure that we conduct open and transparent elections. So the priorities are, number one, to keep the public safe by not being a feeder into identity theft. Number two, to keep the records safe and free from hacking from bad actors on the outside. And the third one, which you're engaged as my partner, is to conduct elections that instill trust in our electorate.
Thank you. My final question, what are the challenges that your department is facing today?
I think that's a great question. I'll start it off. These are not in orders of importance for sure, but budget is always a concern. Over the last several years, we've been dealing with COVID, which is a certain challenge that lives with us here today. And to be able to budget to conduct an election, we had to split up our elections often into three different facilities just so we can prevent a contagion from coming through our election staff, because come election day, it's election time and you got to do the election. Somebody's got to be there to do it. So a budget is always a concern. The county has been very gracious to us for that. COVID is a new challenge, new meaning the last couple of years we've had to deal with it. It's hard to perform a function where a lot of people are gathered at the same place and to try to keep everybody safe. So that's a challenge that's living with us now. Redistricting, every 10 years we go through that. The end result of all the efforts of all the politicians and all the folks that are responsible for drawing these lines in districts, the end result of that is that we have to build a ballot based around those new guidelines and the new district boundaries. So that's something that we're facing. One of the things that is a constant challenge for us is the disinformation that is out in the public and that stirred emotions nationwide about elections in general. And we deal with that on a local basis here in Ventura County every day that we go to work. It seems like we're always trying to respond to or countermand something that's being put out in the national media, which is not true. Ventura County and California in general, we have very good election laws here. And we work very hard to stay within the boundaries of those laws and the mandates of those laws. One of the misconceptions fueled by, again, the national media discussion is they feel that the local practitioners of elections, registrar of voters, we make a lot of policy and we do a lot of things based on our own thinking. And that's entirely false. really the chief elections officer of the state is the Secretary of State. And we're an arm of the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State makes the rules for elections. We administer them. The legislatures make the laws that surround elections. So most everything that we do in elections is law-based. And it's very difficult sometimes when you have media outlets that are fanning the fire about whatever the election topic is that is not necessarily true. We have to counter that here in Ventura County, and it's a constant effort. I think we do a pretty good job of it here. The other thing that's a challenge for us is when we constantly hear the demand and the beating drum about voter ID. Some states have it, our state does not. That's something that when I'm out speaking to groups, I get hit all the time with, why don't we have voter ID? That's the legislature's responsibility. I administer what the laws that they pass. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on with voter ID, including misinformation, again, by the same sources I previously mentioned, that concern the topic of voter ID. My opinion on voter ID is not relative. I have no opinion as a public official. I think that the most sacred thing that we do as Americans is to vote. And it's my job in this county to administer those elections fairly and freely and with as much transparency as we can possibly do. So that's kind of the challenges that I see in a nutshell. We also, this year, for one of the other hats that I wear, AB 1466 has been passed by the legislature. It doesn't impact elections. It impacts the recorder's section of the office. It's brand new legislation. And what that tells us is that any improper language that may be contained in a document, a real estate document in particular that we record, we have to make sure that it doesn't have any improper reference to, for example, race or verbiage that isn't consistent with modern English language standards. That's a big beast that got passed in Sacramento without a lot of rules and guidelines as to how to do that. And what's unfortunate for me as a recorder is that we do not make the documents. We don't create the documents that we record. Others do. Title industry, escrow folks, yet we're responsible to try to clean up something that they've done. We've had laws that already prevent inflammatory language that is contained in a document cannot be recorded. That's long been legislated. But this 1466 really is going to throw the recorder's hat that we wear a real curveball to try to get that done. But I think that that's it. You know, I've talked about redistricting, the disinformation in the media, the fact that we're an arm of Secretary of State. We don't create things. We just follow what we get told to do or what the law tells us to do. So I think those are the challenges.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lunn, for all this important information. At this time, we're going to open it up to questions from our attendees, and I will turn it over to Chelsea Sapula to facilitate the question and answer session.
Hi, Chelsea.
Hi. Thanks, Pat. Thank you, Mr. Lunn. I have a question from our audience about whether the County Clerk-Recorder, Registrar, or Voters is one position, or could there be two or more people serving to do these two different jobs?
It's been one position for many years. It's something that is able to be accomplished certainly by me and by my predecessors. There are some models in other counties, I alluded to this earlier, where the Registrar of Voters is an appointed official and that's their sole job. When I took office, most of the state of California was clerk, recorder, registrar of voters. The registrar of voters thing is part and parcel of what a county clerk does. So in 1873, we had the sheriff and the county clerk and the assessor were elected in the county when we broke off from Santa Barbara County. And it's a model that's worked really well for us. Yes, it certainly could be broken up. To break it up would be more expensive, obviously, because you would have other people that had to be employed to do what we do here. And we're pretty effective. We've got folks that have primary responsibilities, division chiefs, if you will, for the various responsibilities. So we have a very efficient model here, and there's been no talk here of changing that and changing history for the county by making it a multi-person responsibility.
Okay. And how does the Voters' Choice Act make our elections different from past years?
Well, there's a lot to go with that Voters' Choice Act, and I know the league is going to be very helpful in getting information out on the different ways that we're going to be voting. We've had a couple of times that a couple of elections we've conducted where internally we call it a Voter Choice Act light, where we did most of the provisions of the Voter Choice Act, but now we're transitioning into be a full-time Voter Choice Act county. Here's what it is, basically. Every registered voter in Ventura County gets a ballot, a vote by mail ballot, which is the same ballot, as you know, as a ballot that you vote on in a polling place. We're eliminating the neighborhood polling places. This is by law. We're not doing it, but the law says that we don't have polling places anymore. We have what we call vote centers or voter assistance centers to help the voter. The difference there is this. If you were a registered voter and you lived in Ventura, the city of Ventura, and you worked in the city of Simi Valley, and you worked late, and you wanted to make sure that you got to a polling place, which you can go vote at any polling place, and you went to a local Simi Valley polling place, you would be given a ballot under the old style of the common offices that are up for election countywide, not the home ballot that you would be getting in the city of Ventura. Here with these vote centers, all the ballots are the same. You can go anywhere in the county. It's based on a mathematical formula based on the amount of registered voters that we have. So that's one thing. Everybody gets a vote by mail ballot. Vote by mail ballots go out 29 days before the election. On May 28th of this year, we're going to be opening up vote centers. There'll be 10 of them initially for the first beginning of the 11 days countdown to the election. And then 4 days prior to the election, we will have 51 locations scattered throughout the county based on how the law wants these centers to be located. And so that's kind of the major difference. So you can vote anywhere. You can take your vote by mail ballot that was mailed to you and procrastinate or study and drop it off at one of these voter assistance centers. You can register to vote at the voter assistance center. You could not do that under the old system of polling places that was only active for 1 day. So I think the Voter Choice Act, we were a slow mover, as with most counties, because it's a much more expensive way to conduct elections. But I'm a believer in it now, because what we've seen is people have discovered the wonder of receiving your ballot at home and having all that time ahead of election day to be able to study or procrastinate and make your choices in your jammies and then be a part of the system. We had a great turnout. And, it was my job to, first of all, to make the decision that we were going to go to the Voter Choice Act, not the boards or anybody else. It's Registrar Voters' Choice. And now it's my job to obtain the money to make sure that we have all the money we need to do it. And we've done that. And we've submitted our plan. In June is our first rollout as the first Voter Choice Act county. And we're really looking forward to it as an organization. And I hope the voters will continue in their zeal and show up and mark that ballot and get it to us so we can count it.
So you have budgeted enough money for the primary and the November 22nd election. You're not concerned there about funding?
We've got the primary covered based on the last budget cycle. And the one coming up in November will be in a different budget year, and we'll take care of that as well. We've developed a reputation here of being frugal, being efficient, and we pretty much get what we need to do to conduct the election. Here's the reality of things. Who wants to be that county supervisor that tells the registrar that they can't have the money to perform a function when it deals with voting? Mom and apple pie. So this county has been very good to us, and we'll have what we need to get done, all we need to do for the Voter Choice Act.
What problems do you anticipate, or what problems did you encounter in the last election that you might have fixed, like lines in Simi Valley, or power outages in Oakview, or bumps in the road, things like that?
Yeah, there's always things that happen, and we certainly aren't in charge of the light switches. We do have a system that we've learned more from, obviously, for the last power outage that we had. We have a fail-safe system for people to be able to vote. We don't need to. We're not dependent on electricity. If electricity goes out, people can still vote. So Voter Choice Act allows folks to vote either electronically on a pad or the old-fashioned way by marking the ballot. They can mark the ballot. They're not going to be disadvantaged. The long lines is something that we study all the time. There was no way for us to anticipate we were going to have the lines that we had in Simi Valley. We've studied it, and we know, and we know now where our potential big votes will be coming from. Voter demand, and Simi Valley is one of those places. It's also possible that now that they've experienced, that was the first time we did a Voter Choice Act light. That was the first time that Simi Valley had those big lines. Well, it's very possible now, if the voters get used to the method of voting, that we may not have those lines there, but we're going to be geared up for it. We've looked at every one of the locations that we're going to be setting up, and we've looked at the registered voters, and we've looked at past turnouts, and we will staff according to what our past history has shown us to be. Here in the county, we only have about 10% of our voters, of our record-breaking number of registered voters, vote the traditional way on election day. Everybody else votes by mail, or they drop their ballot off at the polling place. So what we're doing is we're planning for 10% of our electorate, and it's difficult for us to judge whether somebody's going to come in that day or send their ballot back through drop boxes or the United States mail. Did I answer that? Okay.
Yes. Can you speak a little bit about what the temporary jobs for the upcoming election will be, given the new way we're conducting the election with the Voters Choice Act? How many jobs will there be? What kind of hours will they need? And can they be shared with other trained workers?
Well, this is what I know so far. We know that the vote centers are going to be open from 10 to 6. And of course, we need setup time and tear down time after those days. And the folks that'll be working in there may be 5 people assigned to a place, or could be 7, 10, 11, Simi Valley. They will be doing the full range of duties, receiving voters, answering voters' questions, taking their ballots, and getting them through the process. There's also, so that'll be eventually we'll have 51 vote centers. There's also work inside the election division where we are registering voters to vote, where we're processing ballots, preparing them to be counted to vote. There's a whole range of jobs and responsibilities that they will be doing. And the good thing about the Voter Choice Act, because it's so efficient, because everybody gets a vote by mail ballot, we are employing fewer people, but we still need an active and a viable workforce. I don't know the final numbers yet, because we're still doing the studies on locations that have not yet been confirmed, but we're probably looking at an additional 300 or so positions that we'll be bringing in stages as we count down and get closer to the election for the June cycle.
Okay, and can you describe what kind of security measures are being taken to assure the integrity of the vote?
Well, when I first got here, I took a look through, based on my law enforcement experience, to see how we were securing our votes here at the government center. We installed a camera system that can track the ballot from the time it enters the office, either by the delivery of the mail or by the delivery off the back dock when it's being delivered by elections personnel to us. So we have cameras that watch, and they watch all areas where there is what we call in-house as a hot ballot, a ballot that somebody has voted on. And every position that deals with ballots on a full-time basis, we have cameras, and the cameras are being monitored. For access to the elections division, everybody has to check in. There's nobody allowed behind the counter of elections without coming through the front desk and an ID tag placed upon them. So folks, there's a lot of folks, if your workforce goes from 20 to 100, sometimes it's not possible to know everybody. So that ID shows who should be there. Everybody that comes to work for us goes through a background investigation. They need a clear background investigation, so that precaution is there. Observers also have their own check-in procedure that they can watch what we do at any time inside the walls of the election division. And then where the actual ballots are tabulated, where the ballots actually get fed into the machines and the races are tabulated. That is in a controlled room that is regulated by the Assistant Registrar of Voters, the Assistant Clerk-Recorder, and myself as to who has access to that room. And so it would be a complement of my executive staff and our IT folks that work for the county, that obviously are backgrounded, that are in the room where the actual magic happens, where we take the stuff that we've been scanning and the X's and the O's and the ones and zeros or whatever the heck they are, and we convert it to the database that actually puts it to a race. So every part of the system here is under observation. Now, we talked about drop boxes. We're going to have a bunch of drop boxes throughout the county as well, places where folks can drop their ballot off. Anybody that touches a ballot in this county there's two people always involved. There's always pairs. So if we go to empty the drop boxes in the eastern part of Ventura County, there are two people in a car. They go to a drop box location. There's two people standing there to unlock the box and bring back the ballots. They're all part of a background process if they're folks that are not full-time employees that are going out to pick those up. So we have a pretty good system there. This is the first time that we've not had deputy sheriffs bring in the ballots from the locations because the system is different now. The ballots get placed into a sealed bag, and the boss at the election, the voter center, takes the bag accompanied by a partner, and they drive it here to Ventura County under the premise that it takes two people to make a conspiracy to try to do something nefarious. And we know when they leave, they let us know when we leave, and we're looking at times of transport, that sort of thing. So we've never had a problem with that. The drop boxes that we have out, we're going to have new boxes. Some new boxes out this year are constructed exactly for that purpose, to be able to put your ballots in and have them safely contained, and they're in use throughout the country. So they're safe in there. And I can't think of anything else unless you guys have a question of a vulnerability that you might want to ask if we've got that base covered. But I'm pretty confident that we have good control of the ballots that we have outstanding.
Okay, here's another question. As you mentioned, disinformation about elections is an ongoing challenge for those who administer elections and engage in outreach and education to inform eligible voters. Nationally, disinformation resulted in threats and the harassment of county election officials. The DOJ created the Election Threats Task Force in June, and last week announced more justice assistance grant funding for state elections officials. Will your office benefit by increased funding to deter, detect, and protect against disinformation and any future threats to election officials and staff, including those working at new vote centers?
Yes, I think that we will benefit from that because they're paying attention now to cybersecurity things. We are a very mobile society that a lot of what we do is done right on this thing here. We are under threat. And I used to do threats of public officials for a living a couple of years ago, and teasing. And it's a real deal. I've received threats here myself. We're kind of entering into kind of a new area, and there are threats that are out there. We here in California have been pretty good overall, but the more money that you place to keeping the system and the folks that work in the system safe, I think it's money well spent. And fortunately here, we've not had a major problem. There are other counties that they've had trouble, just our county to the south of Los Angeles County. That's a lot of that stuff, like I say, is whipped up by the national media, and the stuff that was reported on during the last presidential election doesn't do us any favors when they make the kind of claims that they make. So fortunately, we don't have that experience. I don't have ballots that show up in the middle of the night, unaccounted for, like as was reported. But you'd be surprised how many times I have to answer that question. So we count every ballot that we get. There's no ballot that doesn't go uncounted unless it legally can't be counted. Part of that process is the fact that we make sure that person is a registered voter. We look at now, because everybody gets a vote by mail ballot. A great tool that we have here in California is that we're mandated to look at every ballot and to verify every signature to make sure it's a registered voter. So while it doesn't directly impact the day-to-day operation here, it certainly puts extra stress and strain on having to answer those accusations on pretty much a daily basis on the folks that do the elections. So yeah, I think the money would be well spent.
And can you talk about the steps that are taken to verify signatures on ballots?
Yes, when the ballots first arrive, let's take we get a ballot back by mail, for example. Ballots come in, we schedule a run on a machine that we have that does precincting for us, and so gets run through the machine. The machine has a high-speed camera that captures the information on the ballot and the signature on the ballot, if there is one. Sometimes they don't have one, and it'll put it in a bin to tell us that this ballot needs to be looked at further. Or if the ballot is too light, it'll put it in a bin that says that we have a problem with it. It's too heavy, it'll put it in a bin that says that there's something wrong with it. So we will run that machine to try to get that information. It helps save time for precincting. But part of that is signature verification. It captures the signature as well. And for those ballots that don't get tossed out or not final processed in that room, a screen goes out to our folks that are assigned to signature verification duties, and they look at every signature. The machine looks at the signatures And the machine will toss out signatures that are improper or they don't look right. But we don't depend on that. Here in Ventura County, if we had 220,000 people vote, we had 220,000 signatures that human eyeballs said yes to before the vote is counted. If the person reviewing the signatures can't make that decision, you'd be surprised how quickly you become signature verification experts. There is training, but you become very, very good. You can tell in your own household, is that your husband's signature or your wife's or your son or daughter? They pass that along to a supervisor, and the supervisor will look at it. And if the supervisor can't make a determination, sometimes they'll use a partner supervisor to look at it as well. If they can't make a decision based on that, it goes to the manager, the operations manager of elections. Martin Kobos does that. If Martin can't determine with all the folks that have previously looked at it, if the signature is valid or not valid, then it goes to the Assistant Registrar of Voters. And our new one, and congratulations to her, is Miranda Novriga. This will be her first big election. She's just, Miranda had done other duties in the department, was recently promoted in January to this new position. She'll be at the end of that chain before it comes to my desk. When I first got here, in 2010, I would get, a handful of ballots that we couldn't tell to do a signature verification on. Over the years, it's not come up high enough in the chain to come to my attention, because what we try to do is employ an old sports rule that tie goes to the runner. If we have signatures that people have given us every time they filled out a voter registration card, every time they voted, and we'll find something in there. If we find something in there that we can say that this is a good vote to be counted, then we'll count it. So I hope that explains the process. It's every ballot gets looked at by human eyes. So.
And just to clarify, the signature is actually on the envelope that contains the ballot, not the ballot itself, correct?
One more time, I didn't hear the end of that, please.
Just to clarify, the signature is actually on the envelope that contains the ballot, not the ballot itself.
That's correct. That's correct.
And how do you handle the ballots that don't have signatures?
Well, we try to. We know that the ballot was addressed to Mark Lunn, so we try to get a hold of Mark Lunn and say, hey, we send them a letter. We'll phone them. If they have an email, we'll email them. Sometimes we do all to say, hey, look, we're mandated by law to do this. We've got a ballot here that doesn't have a signature on it. Would you please verify that this is your ballot, and that what is your signature? Send us an exemplar of your signature, and then they send it to us, and we reconcile a lot of those ballots every election. Sometimes people just forget the ballot envelope has got a lot of information on it required by law. Sometimes they miss it, they forget, they're busy getting ready to take kids to school, whatever the excuse is, they forget it. We do all we can to try to cure that signature. And the law allows us, in fact, up to 2 days before we certify the election to allow somebody to cure what we call cure their signature. It could also be an adjunct to your question, is that the signature doesn't match what we have on file. So, or we think it doesn't match what we have on file. So we will contact that voter and say, hey, we received a ballot. Is this your signature? So we call that curing of signatures. It's a lot of effort that takes place after election, the Tuesday election day. The legislature was very wise in saying that we have 30 days to certify an election. And that's all the detective work. That's part of the detective work that takes place after election day to make sure that every registered voter that wants their voice to be heard is heard.
What kind of metrics specifically might be on that voter report card for your office every 4 years? And how can we as voters gauge the effectiveness of your office?
Well, the most obvious, I think, and I'm not trying to be facetious, obviously, is do I get reelected? That's one metric. The other thing is that we have contacts with voters all the time, and we're just talking about the voter discipline, the election discipline at this point. We have a very vibrant customer feedback program. We can do that online. They can do it in person. They can do it by letters. We respond to all of those. We have a pretty good we have a pretty good system to take temperature of what issues that we may have. The best feedback we get are from voters, or from folks that are not full-time employees that have volunteered or raised their hand to come to work for us, and they see a process that they think that needs improvement, and it happens all the time. Our folks have been really good. I've told them that any bureaucracy that has the power to say no to things needs to listen to see if there's a way to get to yes. And so most of our changes and developments over time, over the years that I've been here, come as a result of feedback that we've received from registered voters or folks that have worked for us. We have a culture in the organization that we're not afraid of constructive criticism. We're not afraid to hear what somebody has to say, evaluate it, and then implement it if we think that that's in the best interest of the electorate as a whole. Part of getting to that point was the fact that we've opened up our office at any time for folks to observe and critique what we do. And all of the construction inside the elections office is kind of designed so people can see what we do. If we're recounting the ballots in the computer room, the restricted room that I referred to earlier, it's encased with glass. So anybody that comes into the division can actually see what we're doing. The ballots that are going through the precinct process that I described, that's full of glass. The folks that are looking at ballots, there are a lot of ballots that we receive that it's not clear initially what that voter wanted to vote for. It's pretty clear when they vote for a Mickey Mouse or Jesus Christ, or we have budding artists out there that like to send us things that involve one finger, or they want to make political comments. And then there's a lot of people that make a mistake on their ballot, and it's our responsibility to go back and fix that, or try to determine what the voter intent was. So our process is open and available for the public. There are groups out there that watch. Political parties are the best to look at things, and some of what they say is political in nature, and we look past that. But some of what they point out is constructive, and we evaluate it and we implement it. One of the things that we've had issues with recently has been COVID, because of the mandate for health. We got somewhat limited by how many people that we could allow in at one time to observe. And then we instituted, because we felt that transparency is important, we instituted a Zoom process that if we couldn't get somebody in because of you couldn't meet minimal distancing or masks or that sort of thing, that they could observe what we're doing online by camera. So an open process, I think, helps to generate change. And I think that, to me, that's the best barometer that I have based on what the public has to say about how we do our work. And people aren't shy. Trust me, they're not shy. So.
Other than the voters themselves, is there somebody in the county or at the state level that has oversight of you in your office?
No, not really. Oversight meaning, maybe we should define oversight. What type of oversight are you?
I guess organizational or ethical or administrative. It's a broad question, but if you were messing around and the voters didn't know about it, who would be in a position to do something about it?
If the voters didn't know about it,
Correct.
well, there's employees that have been, I have long-term employees here that obviously are not shy about saying what they see or hear or process that we're doing. There's the auditor controller for the county that audits programs, management practices, money being spent. There's many levels of review of how we spend the money, why and where. And that process is very illustrative or would expose practice of, some nefarious practice that I was doing. So there is some level of trust, as there is with somebody looking at a ballot and drawing a line to that person that's on the ballot, Mark Lunn or whoever it might be. There is that level of trust. If you don't do your job and you mess up, somebody in the county is going to hear about it. The auditor controller runs a program that it's a fraud program or an abuse program for folks that aren't doing their job. And they investigate all those complaints that come through. And then the levels of review about how you manage your programs, how you spend your money, how you do what you do is looked at by other entities in the county executive office. Even though I don't report to the county executive, everything that I do is open and transparent for them to take a look at in a review. We also have a department assigned analyst that their job is twofold: to try to help us get what we need and to evaluate on a full-time basis what we do. So that is out of our structure. It's in the CEO's structure. And ultimately, if somebody was up to nefarious deeds, the county would know about it. They would investigate it and it'd be very public. So.
Okay, and final question. Will you have a statement in the voter information guide or the Voter's Edge, which is a nonpartisan information site supported by the League of Women Voters California Education Fund?
Well, I'm not sure. Is that something that the league promotes?
The league promotes Voter's Edge. Yes, that's a partnership of the league and then the county's voter information guide.
Look, for one, I had the honor when I first got elected to address one of your conventions as a keynote speaker early on in either 10 or 11. You have been great partners with us. You're an organization that we don't fear. You're an organization that helps us do what we do and help us communicate. So if that's a vehicle that you want us engaged in, we absolutely will do that. I think it's important because you are nonpartisan, the way you started off this day today. There's only one of you. Everybody else is partisan. And so whatever we can do to highlight process and to encourage involvement and knock down the barriers that people have for voting, we're all in.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mr. Lunn. I'm going to turn it back over to Pat for a few concluding remarks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Lunn. Before we end the interview portion, is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered so far?
No, I think you pretty much covered it all. I think that I'm going to say it again. I didn't have to come to work here. The most precious thing that we do as Americans is to vote. And I need all the help that I can get to make sure that those folks get in and exercise their vote. And you've been very helpful, and I hope that relationship continues.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much, Mr. Lunn, for joining us today and helping us to better understand the role and responsibilities of the Office of the County Clerk and Registrar voters. We really appreciate all the information you shared with us and having the opportunity to meet you.
Thank you very much.
It's been our pleasure.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
You take care, be safe out there, and
We will.
we'll see you all during the election.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I would like to remind everybody that the next Wednesday, we will be meeting at the same time, place, and hearing from County Treasurer, Tax Collector, Stephen Hintz. As a reminder, recordings of this session and all future ones will be available. Please go to the League of Women Voters website to access a link to the recording. Thanks to everyone for attending, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. This concludes today's presentation.